All right, Isaiah 40. Let's call this passage that once again reminds us that God is amazing. Let's call it exhausted though, because part of the difficulty in maintaining focus on how amazing God can be in our times of difficulty is the fact that we can have exhausting stretches of life between those brighter times. And so in this chapter that begins and ends with relatively famous passages, the reality of how difficult it can be to serve God or even believe in God at times in life, if you're honest, is part of what we might be able to get a better foothold in handling in this chapter that reminds us of the value in waiting on the Lord if we can get over the difficulty of at times being flat out exhausted. In this chapter, as we said, it starts out relatively famously by speaking, verse 1, comfort. Comfort my people, says your God, as he's going to say in verse 2, because they have already received double for all of their sins. Understanding that God has not cut corners on the accountability or the standard to which he has held Israel because they are his people, setting an example in the way that he deals with his own people for his unshakable standards of justice that are only balanced out by his mercy. And so we are getting in the first two verses to see both of those, both his justice, giving double to his people, and his mercy, letting them know that their days of relief are finally at hand. Going on in verses 3 through 5 to give us an even more famous passage talking about the way in which he is going to prepare the way of the Lord, a passage that is going to be once again quoted in the New Covenant, seeming to refer to the way in which John the Baptist prepares the way for the Christ. John the Baptist prepares the way for the Christ. Going on in verses 6 through 8 to give us another famous passage quoted in the epistle of Peter, saying in verse 6, a voice says, cry, and what shall I cry? All flesh is grass, and its beauty like the flower of the field. Verse 8 saying, the grass withers, the flower fades, but the word of our God will stand forever. That forever being an anchor to the end of the entire chapter, which is going to go on to talk about the ways in which as many things as we can find a cause to hope in, the only thing that will really endure, because the only thing that cares for us with any kind of genuine endurance is the love of God. And that is the basis on which we should wait for him, no matter how long we have to endure our difficult times. And so here he's going to say that the word of the Lord endures forever, but it is not just his truth that endures forever. It is the truth of his promises. The promise that if we indeed wait for him, it does eventually pay off. Going on for now, though, from verses 9 through 11, we'll talk about the ways in which, behold, it is time for them to take a high position to understand the way in which they will need to see the things that God has done in order to be encouraged about the things that he is about to do in the way of not only saving them with a strong arm, but tending them with the level of care that not every shepherd can be entrusted to care for the flock. Why? Because we are just people. And no matter how much we might love the people around us, we all have a point at which we will more than likely fail them or even maybe, unfortunately, betray them in some way. God, however, does not share human fears and therefore can be trusted in ways that even the best human leaders cannot be trusted. However, going on from verses 12 through 17, he is going to use that as a basis to give a few details that is going to say, basically in the entire middle section, to whom are you going to compare God that he should be like them, to basically live up to the standards that you have set for what you might want leaders to be. Verses 12 through 17, making that point in a manner similar to the way in which God made that point to Job, helping Job to understand that no matter how closely he walked with God, there were a number of things, many things that he still had not considered about how great God was beyond even his own expectations. And so verses 18 through about 21 are going to therefore say, if you want to set up an idol or an image in which to put your hope, what are you really going to compare them to if you have any genuine perspective on what God actually is? If you have actually taken enough time to consider the things that he has actually done. What are you actually going to compare him to make a measurement for your idols or anything that you would choose to look up to? As he's going to go on from verses 22 2 through 24 to talk about, once again, he not only is larger than anything that we can imagine, he literally sits above the circle of the earth, similar to what he said before in verses 12 through 17, the things that we can accumulate, the things that seem beyond our sight line here on this earth are barely enough to count for much and actually account as less than nothing in comparison to what God is in his fullness. Understanding that even the things we perceive about God are only a fraction of who he actually is. Reminiscent of what the Queen of Sheba said about Solomon when she finally got to see Israel at its height. And she said, the half had not been told to me, even though the stories were grandiose. If that was her reaction to actually meeting Solomon, having him surpass her expectations, God is letting us know here in Isaiah 40, your expectations are nothing compared to what he actually is. As he will go on in verses 25 and 26, once again to say, to whom then will you compare me, that he should actually be like your expectation of what greatness is. Verses 27 on through the end of the chapter, then going on to say, why do you say, O Jacob, and speak, O Israel, my way is hidden from the Lord, and my right is disregarded by my God. Pointing forward to our theme for this chapter, that being exhausted, which comes toward the end of that other or one of the other famous passages we mentioned, starting around verse 28, where it says, have you not known? Have you not heard? The Lord is the everlasting God, the creator of the ends of the earth. He does not faint or grow weary. His understanding is unsearchable. He gives power to the faint, and to him who has no might, he increases strength. Even youths shall faint and be weary, and young men shall fall exhausted, but they who wait for the Lord shall renew their strength. They shall mount up with wings like eagles. They shall run and not be weary. They shall walk and not faint. As a famous song goes, teach me, Lord, to wait.